Freedom didn't arrive the way I thought it would. I thought it would feel like arrival, like one rising I would wake up and the old weight would be gone, and I would be standing in some clear, free version of myself. Finally, just free. Done. Arrived. That is not what happened. What happened was slower and stranger and more interior than that. Freedom came in the spaces left behind by the things I put down, by the beliefs I examined and found didn't belong to me, by the versions of myself I stopped performing, by the love I stopped shrinking for, and the voice I stopped apologizing for, and the body I stopped managing, and the God I stopped being afraid of, and the woman I finally let myself be. Freedom came not from adding anything. It came from removing, from going through everything I had been handed, every belief, every rule, every should and shouldn't, and that's not for people like you, and asking, one by one, slowly, sometimes painfully, is this mine? Did I choose it? Does it serve the life I'm actually trying to live? Or was it just handed to me so many times I stopped questioning whether it fit? This is the last episode of Season 1 of Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. And I want to spend it doing the most honest thing I know how to do, telling you what I had to unlearn. Specifically, not in theory, in the actual texture of my actual life. Because I think the most useful thing I can offer you is not advice, but witness. Not here's what you should do, but here's what it looked like when I did it. And maybe in my specific, you find something that belongs to you too. I'm Neeka, and we're going all the way in today. One last time for Season 1. Let's go. The first thing I had to unlearn was the version of myself that had been built for my family's comfort. Every family, consciously or not, assigns roles, shapes, versions of their children that fit the family system, that serves its needs, that keeps things running smoothly, or keep the peace, or fill the gap that needed filling. And you grow up in that shape. You wear it so long it starts to feel like your actual face. For me, that shape was capable, accommodating, not too loud, not too much, reliable, present, the one who handles things. We spent a whole episode on this, on what being the strong one cost. And what I didn't fully say there, but I want to say now, is that putting that shape down felt like a small death. Not a metaphorical one, an actual grief. Because that shape was also where I learned I was loved, where my presence was valued, where I was necessary. Unlearning it meant asking a question I had been avoiding for years. Who am I when I'm not being useful to someone? Who am I when I'm not performing capability, not managing, not holding it together for people who needed me to? The answer came slowly, and it was simpler and stranger than I expected. I was curious, funny, interested in things no one in my family shared, deeply spiritual in ways that didn't fit the religion I was raised in. Drawn to a life that looked different from the life that was expected. It turned out, quite a lot when I stopped spending all of it on everyone else. Unlearning the family version of me did not mean abandoning my family. I want to be clear about that because I know some of you are bracing for that conclusion. It meant learning the difference between love and performance, between care and compulsive availability, between being present in a family and being consumed by it. I can love the people I came from and still be someone they didn't fully plan for. Both things are true, both things are mine. I had to unlearn almost everything I was taught about my body. I was taught through church, through culture, through the particular way Caribbean womanhood gets constructed, that my body was primarily a liability, something to be managed, covered, controlled, something that got into trouble if you weren't careful, that invited attention you shouldn't want, that needed to be disciplined and minimized and offered only in the right context, at the right time, to the right person, by the right rules. I was not taught that my body was mine, that its pleasure was valid, that desire, the desire to be touched, to feel good, to experience joy in physical form, was not shameful, that wanting was not weakness, that what I felt in my body was information, not sin. For queer women specifically, this, this unlearning has an extra layer because the desire I felt, specific, real, undeniable desire for women, was not just unmanaged, it was wrong. It was in the framework I was handed, something to be prayed away, suppressed, hidden, converted into something more acceptable. The body I lived in was telling me one truth, and the world I lived in was telling me another. And for a long time, I tried to make those two truths coexist. The effort of the coexistence was enormous. The unlearning, what I was taught about my body, meant learning to inhabit it again, to listen to it, to trust its signals. Not just the boundary signals we talked about in episode 5, but the pleasure signals too. The this feels good signals. The this is right signals. The my body knows something my mind is still arguing about signals. My body was right. It was right all along. And coming back to it, really back to it, in full residency rather than uneasy tenancy, is one of the most ongoing, most tender, most important pieces of work I have ever done. This one is complicated, and I want to hold it carefully because I know for some of the people listening, faith is the most precious thing they have. And I'm not here to take that from anyone. What I want to talk about is the difference between faith and the institution of faith, between the sacred and the system that was built around it, between a genuine living relationship with something larger than yourself and a set of rules designed by human beings in a particular historical and cultural context that got handed to you as the direct word of God. I grew up in the church, and the church gave me the real things: community, language for the sacred, a framework for understanding suffering, songs that are still in my body, a sense that there is something present and loving in the world beyond what I could see. And the church also taught me that I was wrong, that the love I felt was sinful, that the questions I asked were dangerous, that doubt was the enemy of faith rather than its companion, that certain parts of my experience, the queer parts, the questioning parts, the parts that didn't fit the prescribed shape of acceptable womanhood, needed to be silenced or healed away. Unlearning religion did not mean unlearning God. I want to be precise about that. It meant unlearning the version of God that needed me to be less than I am. The God who was primarily a judge. The God whose love was conditional on compliance. The God who made all of me and then condemned me for it. That God, I had to put him down. What I found on the other side of putting that down was not emptiness. It was spaciousness. Room for a spirituality that was mine, that held my ancestry, my queerness, my questions, my Caribbean roots and indigenous and African spiritual traditions that were always underneath the Christianity that was imposed over them. Room for a sacred that did not require me to be smaller to access it. That spirituality is still being built. It is not finished. It does not have a name, but it is alive, and it is mine, and it has never once asked me to be less than I am. And after a lifetime of being handed a faith that did exactly that, the contrast is extraordinary. Here's the one thing that threads through everything else: the belief that love is something you earn, that you earn it by being useful, by being good, by being accommodating and capable, and not too much, and not too difficult, by performing the right version of yourself for the people whose approval you need, by staying in your shape, your role, your place, and by the love that comes to you when you do all of that correctly, consistently, without complaint. That belief is so fundamental, so deeply embedded, that most of us don't even know we have it. It just operates as the background assumption of how love works. Of course you have to earn it. Of course it is conditional. Of course it can be withdrawn if you stop performing correctly. That is just what love is. It isn't. But that understanding, even when you arrive at it intellectually, takes years to reach the body, to actually feel in your chest, in your nervous system, in the place where the earliest lessons live, that you are loved not for what you do, but for what you are, that your presence is not contingent on your performance, that you do not have to be useful to be wanted, that you are allowed to show up messy and uncertain and still becoming and still be held. That unlearning is the longest one. It is the one that touches everything else. It is the reason we shrank, because we learned love required smallness. The reason we stayed strong, because we learned love required capability. The reason we kept the peace, because we learned love required our silence. The reason we earned and hoarded and couldn't enjoy what we had, because we learned love required proof of worthiness. You were always worthy, before the performance, before the usefulness, before the good behavior and the right shape and the earned approval. You were always worthy. And the work, all of it, everything we have talked about this season, is just the slow, brave, necessary work of coming to believe it. I want to speak directly and specifically about this one, because it is mine, and because I think there are women listening to whom this is also theirs, and who have never heard it named out loud in a space that felt safe. I was not supposed to love women. I knew it early, the way you know things that were never said, through the silence around them, through the way certain conversations stopped, through what was preached and what was whispered, and what was treated as the thing we do not speak of. And I spent years, more years than I want to count, trying to be someone who didn't, trying to pray it away, trying to redirect it, trying to fit into a shape that would be acceptable to my community, my family, the God I had been handed, the Caribbean woman I was supposed to be. The trying was exhausting in a specific way, the kind of exhausting that gets into your bones, the kind that doesn't resolve with sleep or rest because it's not tiredness. It is the cost of being fundamentally at war with yourself, of living in the gap between who you are and who you are performing, of knowing in your body the truth while your entire external life is organized around a different story. Unlearning who I was allowed to love was not one moment. It was not a single decision or a single conversation. It was a gradual, faltering, sometimes terrifying process of letting the truth be more important than the comfort of those around me, of deciding that my wholeness mattered more than their ease with me. And what was on the other side of it? What is on the other side of it? Because this is ongoing. Because being a queer Caribbean woman in the world requires ongoing courage. It is a particular kind of aliveness, a particular quality of being present in your own life rather than observing it from behind the performance, of loving and being loved in ways that are real, that are fully seen, that do not require the most essential thing about you to be hidden. I'm allowed to love who I love. I have always been allowed. The permission was never theirs to grant or withhold. It took me a long time to understand that, but I understand it now, and I'm not going back. We started this season with shrinking, with the instruction that was handed to me before I was old enough to refuse it. A child is to be seen and not heard. Stay in your place. And I want to end this season here too, with the voice, with what it sounds like when it finally comes back. Because all of the unlearning, every single piece of it, has been in service of this, of a woman who takes up space, who speaks fully, who says what she thinks without the qualifications at the front and the apology at the end, who disagrees, who asks for what she needs, who tells the truth even when the truth is inconvenient, who is, in the most fundamental sense, present in her body, in her relationships, in her work, in her life. That woman has a voice, and the voice is not something she found. It was always there, underneath the management and the performance and the shrinking and the earning and the holding it together. It was waiting, patient, undiminished, waiting for the conditions to change, waiting to be trusted, waiting to be used. This show is part of me using it. Every episode. The things I said that I have never said out loud. The experiences I named that I had kept private. The truths I spoke into a microphone and sent out into the world without knowing who would receive them. All of it. It is the voice being used unapologetically, which is, after all, the whole point. Unapologetically us. All of it. The healing, the mess, the grief, and the fire, and the love, and the in-between, and the becoming. All of it, without apology, offered to you. Returned to me every time one of you reaches out and says, I heard myself in that. I didn't know someone else had felt this too. I didn't know I was allowed to feel this too. That return is everything. That is why the voice matters. Not just for me, for the woman who needed to hear it and didn't know she did until she did. Before I close this season, I want to walk back through it with you because I think the episodes connect in ways that are worth naming. We started with shrinking, with the instructions that came before we were old enough to refuse it, and the decision, the ongoing renewable decision, to be done with it. We talked about dating while healing, about the humbling of discovering that work doesn't make you immune. It just makes you more awake while the mess is happening. About learning that familiar and safe are not the same thing. We talked about the soft life and survival mode, about the women in our families who never got to rest, about the colonial roots of the hustle that was handed to us, about choosing ease as the completion of something they started. We talked about being the strong one, about the invisibility inside capability, about the loneliness of being everyone's person and nobody's priority, about the body keeping the invoice and eventually collecting. We talked about boundaries, about the no that shook our hands and still counted, about the family guilt and the punishment that was proof the boundary worked, about the body knowing before the mind did. We talked about outgrowing people, about the in-between, about being between homes and the grief of the living and the door that can stay open without you standing in it. We talked about money trauma, about the silence and the stress and the story that was absorbed before anyone sat down and taught us a thing, about the other shoe that is always almost dropping, about beginning the rewrite from the first memory forward. And now we are here in the unlearning, in the arriving at freedom through removal rather than addition, in the woman who is more herself than she has ever been, not because she added something, but because she finally bravely put down what was never hers. That is the season. That is what we built together. That is what you have been brave enough to sit with week after week. And I want you to know, I want you to really let this land, that the listening itself was an act of courage. In a world that would prefer Caribbean women to be quiet and manageable and unbothered and fine, you sat with the uncomfortable and the unresolved and the still being figured out. That is not small. That is the whole thing. I want to say something directly to you now. Not as a host, not in the careful, considered, balanced way I've tried to speak all season. Just directly, from me to you. You're not too much. You never were. Every single thing that was called too much, your voice, your love, your ambition, your questions, your body, your desire, your queerness, your grief, your anger, your need, every bit of it was just the full size of you, meeting a world that was not yet large enough to hold it. The world will have to get larger. That is not your problem to solve. Your job is not to keep making yourself smaller to fit the available space. Your job is to take up the space that is yours, all of it, completely, without asking permission, without apologizing for the adjustment it requires for everyone around you. You have done enough earning, enough performing, enough holding it together and keeping the peace, and making sure everyone is comfortable with the version of you they are presented with. You have been so careful for so long. You can put that down now. You are allowed to put that down. Season 2 is coming, and I want you to come into it knowing that everything we talked about this season, the shrinking, the strong one, the survival mode, the boundaries, and the grief, and the money wound, and all of the unlearning, it was all just the clearing, the making of space, the putting down of what was never yours, so that your hands are free now for what is. Your hands are free. Look what you can carry now. Your invitation for this final episode is different from the others. I don't want to give you a practice or a journal prompt or a thing to notice this week. I want to give you something simpler and harder than that. I want you to name one thing you have already unlearned, not something you are working on, something that is done, something that you used to believe about yourself, about love, about your worth, about what you were allowed to have, want, be, or feel that you no longer believe. Something that has genuinely shifted. Something that if you look back to who you were 2 years ago, or 5, or 10 years ago, you can see has changed. Name it. Out loud if you can. To yourself, to a friend, in a voice note, in a journal. Name the belief. Name the version of you who held it. And then name as specifically as you can what you believe instead now. That gap between what you believed then and what you know now, that is the work. That is all of it. That distance, that distance is not nothing. That distance is everything. That distance is you. Look at how far you have already come. And then look forward and keep going. That is season 1 of Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. 8 episodes, 8 conversations about the things we were never supposed to talk about. about shrinking and strength and survival and boundaries and grief and money and love and the long, ongoing, beautiful work of becoming free. I want to say thank you. And I mean that in a way that goes beyond courtesy. When I started this show, I was doing an act of faith that there were women out there who needed this conversation, who were sitting with exactly these things, who would find their way here and feel less alone in it. And you showed up. You listened. You shared it. You sent it to your friends, your sisters, and your mothers, and the women in your life who needed it. You kept this show alive by being here. That is not a small thing. In a world that would prefer we stay quiet about the difficult and the unhealed and the still being figured out, you chose to sit with it week after week. That is courage, and it deserves to be named as such. Come find me on YouTube, Spotify, and all other socials will be in the description. Tell me what this season meant to you. Tell me which episode hit hardest. Tell me what you have unlearned. Tell me what you are carrying into season 2. I want to know all of it. This show is a conversation, and it only works because you are in it with me. Season 2 is coming. We are going deeper. We are going to places this season pointed toward, but didn't fully enter. We are going to keep being unapologetic about every single thing that we are. Until then, I want to leave you with this. The same thing I said in the very first episode, because it's the truest thing I know, and it bears repeating at the end as a reminder of why we started. You are not too much. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not the wrong version of yourself. You are a whole person still becoming in the middle of the most important work of your life. And that work, the showing up for it, the staying with it even when it's hard and slow and nothing feels like it's moving, that work is holy. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Not the voice inside that sounds like everyone who ever told you to stay small. Not the culture that needs you manageable. Not the relationship that required your smallness to feel okay. Not any of it. You are unapologetically us. All of you. All of it. All the way. I'm Neeka. This has been season 1. I will see you in season 2. And thank you for being here.